HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by MoFad, the Museum of Food and Drink, inspiring public curiosity about food. Learn more at mofad.org.
Hi, this is Lisa Held, host of The Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network. Each week, I record my show because I'm excited to bring you, our listeners, the most important stories about how your food is produced. At this critical moment in time, stories about how and what we eat are more important than ever. I am so honored to be a part of the HRN community of hosts telling those stories. Whether that means hearing from farmers about using soil health to sequester carbon, giving marginalized groups a voice in the industry, or just bringing people together over a good meal. This year, HRN is celebrating its 10th anniversary, and we need your support to keep food radio going strong for the next decade. Join the HRN community today by becoming a member. Go to heritageradionetwork.org/donate right now. You can even show some love for my show by selecting The Farm Report in the designation drop-down menu. Thanks for listening to HRN. All right, hello. This is Lisa Held coming to you live from Roberta's in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And you're listening to The Farm Report, a Heritage Radio Network show about the people, processes, and policies that shape how food is produced today. Today I'm here with Kiana Mickey, the Executive Director of Just Food, a nonprofit organization that has been at the forefront of building sustainable regional food systems in New York and beyond for over 20 years. Welcome, Kiana.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So I'm so excited you're here. I feel like I've known about Just Food for so long. It's one of these organizations that has really been a leader in the food movement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like, we've been around since 1995. So, I think many folks see us, and I am definitely proud to be part of like that vanguard of like sustainable agriculture and food and farm policy in the region and in the city in particular.
And so I know Just Food as kind of basically like the CSA organization, right? Like when I think of the organization, I think that, I feel like it's an organization that really made the network of CSAs in New York a thing, right?
Right? Absolutely. I mean, there were definitely a few farmers in our area that were figuring out how to build a CSA model in the city. But I think Just Food, one of our strongest milestones was being able to start from like 5 farmers through like 10 community members and trying to figure out what a model looks like, making it more accessible to neighborhoods across the city and increasing that from 5 farmers to over 30 farmers and really now being like the strongest, largest CSA network in our region and in our city for sure.
Right. Does the organization actually run the CSAs, or did it just sort of set them up and now it's kind of like you're just introducing people to where they can find them? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Just Food has really always been kind of rooted in self-determination of community food projects and leaders. So with the CSA network, we don't manage. We help manage the network, but we don't manage the individual site.
Got it.
But what we do offer is technical assistance, capacity building, and resources to build the collective power of individual CSA sites. So that's been, over time, starting CSA, so connecting them to farmers when that was like a new part, finding new opportunities and community groups in the city. And then now over time, since it's been, about 25 years, like how to keep those relationships going. What do they need to sustain, to thrive? Merge if they have to, but what really makes them strong, and how do we continue to increase farm viability?
Got it. Okay. And so that's been kind of an ongoing part of the organization's work, right, since the beginning. And then you started in 2017, so not too long ago, a couple of years.
Sort of.
Okay.
I actually came through programming. One of my first, and this has been about 9 years, it's been my relationship with Just Food. I started as, I went to a community advocacy training. And learned about food and farm policy, community organizing, and some of those building blocks in terms of feeling my power on how I could connect to policy and agriculture and bringing food justice to my community.
Okay.
And that really inspired me into finding new ways to bring in other folks. I really, at that point, didn't feel, I was like inspired by the policy, but also just saw the gaps. And I wanted to get more folks just like me, like how do we get aware? How do we connect to our power?
Right.
How can we shift?
What were you doing before that?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even ask you.
Oh, yeah, no worries. I've done work in nonprofits.
Okay.
I've done like development work in the past. I've did development at an arts-based charter school in the South Bronx. I also, long time ago, worked in production and entertainment. Yeah, I've had it's been an interesting road to like food justice, social justice work.
So sorry, I interrupted you, but so you're saying, it was actually like 9 years ago though that you started working with Just Food.
Yeah. I started as as a participant in a training, and what is really great about our trainings is it's really learner centered. So not just learning from the teachers, but connecting to your own power and connecting to your own expertise and lived experience. So it gave me the strength to feel more confident to talk about something like policy or to learn more about it, to connect it to other folks. And from there, I did more volunteering, more engagement around food and farm policy. It was like around the Farm Bill time. So doing more of that, learning for myself as well. And then there was an opportunity, a job opportunity around CSA. At first an assistant position that was part-time, and then I was able to get that job. And then from there moved into like other positions. I left briefly and worked at like a food hub in the city, and then came back in 2017, and then shortly became the ED after that.
Got it. Okay. So the 2017 is just since you've been the executive director.
Exactly.
Okay. And so I before the show, I read an article saying that, it was about your gala and how the gala had changed, but how that was kind of a sign of a bigger shift in the organization.
Yes.
So what's the shift? Tell me what's different.
Yeah. What I really learned from Just Food, and I think what we did really well being that vanguard, was continuing to shift from food security. So what was initially like a farmer focus on making sure that farmers were not displaced from land, and rural farmers displaced from land, and over time like adding urban agriculture training or city farm projects where they were connecting to new markets. What I realized in my time in this work, and then being the ED, is what we were talking about food justice, we weren't really being as bold about the power or the inequities that we were still facing. Like land was still being lost. There's still, farmers, disproportionately Black and Latino farmers that are not landowners.
Right.
There's still neighborhoods that are not getting this like healthy, great food. So I just felt like, Just Food was kind of at a pivot of identity and impact, and also like, how do we really move into that equity lens that really kind of talked about the power? So food became less about just connecting folks to food. Food really became a driver of how to really shift like power, health, and wealth. And that's really what was like the impetus of our like change in direction and mission. Like, are we really focused on shifting like the health wealth of these communities and who are those communities. And for us, it started to become clearer. It's economically and historically marginalized communities.
Right.
So in particular, small scale sustainable farmers, trying to connect more to producers, individuals that want to do nutrition education. So how do you, now that you have the food, what do you do with this food? How do you connect culturally to the recipes of your ancestors to the food now? How do we learn from that? And also, Black and Latino, LGBTQ women, folks that are typically been invisible in this work on a rural level and the urban level, how do we really center them where our programs are focused on amplifying them as opposed to serving them? So kind of shifting from like that charity model that I think a lot of nonprofits do, where it's like, you don't have these things, you're coming from this deficit lens. For us, it's really been like with an equity lens, there should really be something around power. How do we, if we're focused on trying to make sure folks aren't hungry, what do you need to do that? Those are real clear aggregation logistic models that we need to make sure farmers have. What are the opportunities downstate that are actually giving their food a home? Whether that's a home in a consumer level or in a business level, like where is this food going? Mm-hmm. And then, I think for us, it opened the door to like, what's next? How do we actually do that hard work of wealth building in our community? And also as an organization, bringing in those resources that have been divested from. Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, where my mind goes is like, how do you do that? Like how, I'm not going to make you explain everything, but just, maybe an example of how, of your programming now.
Yes.
That speaks to a way that you are sort of trying to shift the power and the health and the wealth. What does that look like in terms of the actual organization's programming?
Yeah. At first it really was honing in on, again, like who are our true partners and how does that continue to shift? And hearing from them what is still missing in their work. So they're so focused on doing what they're doing, whether that's growing, teaching, doing policy, but is there capacity and resources that they're still missing? So what it really kind of it started to show me was what was missing are the scale. Are we scaling up or are we scaling in depth? And I think there are a lot of groups that are serving, or trying to meet big disparities and they're trying to scale up. And I realized who was continuing to get missed are folks that scale in depth. And those are small scale folks. That's hyper-local growers and farmers. Those are like individuals that are community chefs. That's grassroots policy and advocacy. So what I've been trying to do is really kind of going through projects and really trying to see how we can meet those core equity principles: environmental, racial, and economic equity. So, practically for like farmers and producers, I think the focus is increasing capital, in resources back into them, increasing markets, and relevant policies, and also access to those grants and programs. So are we helping address displacement and land ownership of small-scale farmers? Can we do that more for farmers that are disproportionately impacted, like Black and Indigenous farmers, Latino farmers, women farmers? And if we're doing that, the way we can do that well is our connection to markets in the city. So, that's like, again, like, is that a consumer level? Is that a business level? What are those hard pieces or connections? What are those value chains that we can take a step back instead of being redundant in our work of other nonprofits? Are we truly understanding the gaps in the chain, making sure that small scale folks are getting those connections?
Yeah.
And we're building like a network or an economy that, again, like food is that driver. Are we really trying to understand and see, like, are we getting them consistent new markets and opportunities, new relationships? Are we increasing farm viability of those folks? So it's worthwhile coming down in that truck to the city. And there's multiple reasons and places that your food is going to go to, maybe even farther than ever before. So you're not just, say, stopping on the Upper East Side, but maybe it makes sense for you to go to the Lower East Side.
Right.
Maybe if you're a farmer coming from Jersey, it's worth not just stopping in Staten Island, but there might be even worth, another market opportunity in the, say, Lower Manhattan, or other communities in Staten Island. How are we getting beyond just what we know our model has reached, and how do we get to folks? One of our farmers that we work with, what we try to encourage and learn from our relationships is, okay, these are the neighborhoods we've been to. Who is still missing out? How do we support farmers on one end, and on the other side, the self-determination of community leaders? Is that through community-run farmers markets? Is it through other food projects? Is it through business? Is it through CSA? So for us, it's really been trying to, create like better tools like our map and our database, so we're able to make those connections and relationships easier. It's really kind of becoming the connective tissue of this work, so the chain is more realistic. And really being able to see like where the gaps in aggregation and logistics are. So we're not just telling farmers, come on down to the city, but they actually have a reason to come down, and their food is going to have a home, and they're going to have consistent business, so it makes sense to keep coming down. And if we can continue to shift that in neighborhoods of color, in neighborhoods that are mixed income, if there's ways to get that to more homebound folks, medically vulnerable folks, then that's really the work for us to do. And that's really what I've been trying to shift us towards.
Right. I love that idea of connective tissue. What a cool term to use in this context.
Yeah, it's so needed. And I've seen that more and more in this like work and time. It's so needed to be that piece, especially on a small scale, where farmers are able to focus on farming,
yeah, of course,
and building their business, but we can use our capacity and resources to support that work, and at the same time know when to step back, when they should be the voice of their lived experience. So if that looks like, farmer fly-ins on policy level, or being informed by their experience in order to write grants, what are we actually doing where the policies are shifting and getting those resources to them? So sometimes it is about an organization stepping up to use our resources and capacity to, say, speak to elected officials or start relationships with businesses or new community groups. But at the same time, it's been for us when to step back and make sure those are still direct connections as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've been thinking a lot about one of the things you said, which is about sort of amplifying the work of growers from communities that historically have been marginalized, have, not had access to resources, right. Black farmers, Latino farmers, women. And there's so much, I feel like we hear so much about young people of diverse backgrounds getting into farming, and the latest agricultural census data just came out. Right. It's from 2017, but it's the federal government. So 2 years later, we have the data. Right. But one of the most discouraging parts of the census for me was that it showed that more than 95% of American farmers are white. And the average age of the American farmer is still rising. It's like inching up towards 60. I think it's something like 58 point something. But so, I think it's obvious there's still such incredible barriers for young people of color, right, to get into farming. What do you think needs to happen to really not only encourage more people of diverse backgrounds to get into farming, but also the people that are already doing it, to give them access to resources and No,
exactly. I think it's great that there are grants and resources and even programs that are speaking to new farmers or addressing like how do we get more folks into farming. I feel like where our strength is and where my work really lands is, are we just moving them into a precipice where there's no enterprise or opportunity?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
We can train folks as much as we want, and luckily there have been programs that do that. However, what happens after the training?
Right, you don't want them to become farmers if then there's no market and you can't make a living, and right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like for us, it's really been, okay, how do we really learn from existing farmers? What are models that were profitable, regenerative, valuable? And how do we continue to build off on that? And again, I think, when you have an equity lens, you start to see that there were missed opportunities across the chain. We were missing opportunities of different neighborhoods. We were missing opportunities of diversifying businesses and wholesale. When I think a lot of this work is so scaled up, and that might be capitalism, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
We always think like the answer is in scale, and scaling up and volume, and that's the only way that you can like benefit from like demand or benefit from cost or decrease cost. But what we really miss out on is there are genuine folks that still have dollars. There's money that has been purposely kept from farmers, growers, eaters, community leaders, actual neighborhoods, systemically from the individual level to the community and like policy level. So I guess, what I'm trying to say is like there is historical and purposeful policies and practices that were made to keep folks that are the most impacted from being the most activated, from being the drivers of their own wealth building. And so I think what we can do at a small scale, at a feasible scale, is not lose those folks in that chain. How do we really focus on small to family scale farmers, hyper local farmers, to find markets for them that will speak to that scale and that would want to support them and want to know who that farmer is, because that's the kind of farmer they want to support because of their practices, because of their fair, being fair on their labor, being good environmental stewards, and that price is something that can be not just affordable, but accessible. And we understand that price and we're fighting for that price. I think for Just Food, it's not, again, like, I think for a long time, it was just, let's build that connection and that's just it. Or I think some folks are like, let's just identify those farmers and that's just it. But no, there's really a need to figure out how do you make consistent markets and opportunities for individuals and businesses so those farmers have a place. Are we building a pipeline that really addresses the logistic needs of going from the rural, from the upstate to the down? Are we making sure that folks that are of color are new farmers? Are those opportunities where smaller markets would actually be a great entry point for them, as opposed to just ignoring those and saying it's not big enough? And, for us, it's like building on their chain as they're coming down. Is it really figuring out with the farmers themselves, is the aggregation upstate or downstate? How do we really build those pieces that for so long people have skipped because they thought we were too small or too black or too poor? Like, how do we really see these opportunities as opposed to gap? And can we pivot into opportunities, or are we going to always see them as deficits? And I think for Just Food, for us, it's really shifting on that.
Right.
Like shifting on using our time and capacity and resources to build those relationships. So farmers aren't stretched to do that. Community leaders aren't stretched to do that. But we're learning about cooperative business practices. We're learning about policies. So that informs the relationships that we're building with each other. And that to me is like a solidarity economy that we see on an international level. And, to me, the CSA model has been constantly inspiring to me on terms of how to connect that. And on an international level, they speak about solidarity economy, and CSA is a real root of that. And I want to bring that back to our region.
I want to dig into that. We have to take a quick break. So let's do that for a word from our sponsor. And then as soon as we come back, let's dive more into the CSA model. I want to really...
Sounds good.
Yeah. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by MoFad, the Museum of Food and Drink. Featuring a variety of interactive displays, MoFad encourages eaters of all ages to be curious about food. The museum currently operates MoFad Lab, a 5,000 square foot experimental space in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where Chow, making the Chinese American restaurant, is currently on show. This exhibition celebrates the birth and evolution of Chinese American restaurants, tracing their nearly 170-year history and sparking conversations about food culture, immigration, and what it means to be American. It highlights the evolution timeline of Chinese American restaurant menus, dating back to 1910, and also highlights a tasting section where participants get to enjoy tastings created by the country's most talented chefs who specialize in Chinese American cuisine. Check out MoFad's tastings and extensive event calendar at mofad.org/events.
All right, we're back. This is Lisa Held. You're listening to The Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network. I'm here with Kiana Mickey, the Executive Director of Just Food. So right before the break, we started to kind of talk a little bit more about the CSA model, and I cut it off because I really want to get into this. I'm so interested in CSAs because I think like for so long they were seen as the best model in terms of getting healthy, fresh food to eaters while really supporting small farms. It allows farmers to plan ahead for the season, get access to capital up front when they need it. And I think it develops this sort of long-term relationship between farms and eaters, right? That like with the farmer's market, you might go a couple times and then fall off. So, I mean, there's so many aspects of CSAs that seem so effective. But then I've also kind of heard that, you know, there's some statistics that show people belong to them and then tend to fall off and not rejoin. And I'm just curious, so you've got this long history of CSAs, and now sort of in the context of continuing to build the local food movement while really prioritizing equity, do you still feel like CSAs are the best model?
I think CSA model is still a really good model that we should continue to support. We should continue to figure out how to get it to continue to make it more accessible and more affordable. I think for a long time, Just Food is explored different strategies on doing that on the farmer end and the member side. And I definitely don't think this is the time to abandon that. If anything, I think it's the time to be bold and step into that a little bit more. And that's kind of, to me, the inspiration for that is for a long time when I was doing the CSA program work and I'm seeing members lower. I'm hearing from farmers. I'm hearing from core group leaders. I really was trying to find inspiration beyond just our city work and our existing work. And something that really spoke to me was when I had the chance to start connecting to international CSA communities and partners and really seeing how they, on the international level, truly see themselves as connecting to like peasant farmers. So that does speak to, for us here, like small scale. So it's like, we should do that. The CSA model is very radical still in other areas. And I think we need to get back to those radical or what seems like pushing against the status quo and using that model to do that. I do think, what we've seen in the city, and I don't want to minimize, folks to struggle in terms of like, what do I do with my share? Or it's too much for me, or it's not in my neighborhood. I think it's been for us to really challenge ourselves in the last couple of years, the last 2 years, to really dig deeper into that. One of the struggles has been funding. When CSA was fairly new, it was a very funded project and it was well resourced. And I think that really helped spur the growth of the CSA network and, ours and others, more independent ones in the city. But I think over time it started to look like, oh, it's been there, done that. And I think we need to actually think about what the resources are in terms of bringing innovations to that CSA model. And I think, again, it's still a viable model for farmers from what I hear, and I want to support that. But I also think we have to increase their farm viability. That's not just through membership, but there's also strategies that can be done. I think what's been great, Ag and Markets recently gave us some funding to really increase community food project access through SNAP and EBT. So I think for us, what we've been trying to explore more and more is on the value principle or equity principle, how to get more folks that are food insecure to local food in models that are in their neighborhood, that's a definite plus. But to me, it's increasing farm viability. If there are more folks that have access to other capital to buy food, it's going straight into the local food market. It's going straight to that farmer. That is a way to help expand membership. That's a way to diversify it, to make it more equitable. But it's also increasing farm viability. And I think sometimes, in policy, people feel it's too esoteric or it splits us apart. I think these are really the times that we need to find what things that actually build solidarity among us. Yeah. And I think CSA can still do that.
Are there any initiatives that allow SNAP and EBT recipients to use those dollars for CSAs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know that I've seen a lot with farmers markets. I know a lot of farmers markets now take SNAP, and there's also like great programs where you can like the double up where, your dollars go further. But I never actually have seen a CSA. Does that exist in New York?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, Just Food was one of the organizations years ago that really advocated and pushed for the policy change to make sure that SNAP was able to be accessed at farm shares, small base food groups, and in particular CSAs. So that's something that we've always kind of helped CSAs do. But over time, it's our outreach on that has been impacted by the lack of funding to offer it, because that really looks like training, having technical assistance, so folks that are going to say process it, or groups that want to be certified to do it really understand what it takes to do that. And there's a lot of steps in that. And
is it a lot? Like, is it right? Probably
Government.
For the farmer, it's like a ton of paperwork.
And bureaucracy on the farmer side, ton of paperwork and bureaucracy on the community-based group side. And again, CSAs are volunteer-driven models.
Yeah.
So they are not folks that have a business. Many of them are not affiliated with a community-based organization that has staff that's going to do that. There's other details in terms of getting certified that can be barriers to them too, in terms of who's signing up to be the for the bank account, who's signing up to be the CBO. You need like a CBO partner, or a farmer, like the business entity structure. If you're a community group, you don't have a business entity structure.
Yeah.
So it's been some of those barriers that we've continued to try to figure out. And again, like, I'm really encouraged by the funding that we had, and I'm really hoping to continue to find new funding and resources to expand our work around training on EBT. So core group leaders and CSAs are able to train to learn how to accept it. They're able to learn how to build the relationships they need with entities with a business structure so they can actually be certified to do it. We're able to also train farmers in doing it, and then the actual process of it, and getting the outreach. So folks that are in the community actually know that it's available.
That they can even use it for that, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Or, I mean, a lot of people in all communities still don't even know what a CSA is, right?
Exactly.
So it's like there's so many steps, right, just to get to there.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's been really encouraging this year to really have projects like our food startup project, and really, again, looking at some of our historical projects like CSA or farmer relations work. Like, how do we actually do that? And I do think in those ways, it's not only impacting policy and advocacy, because now there would be even more folks that are impacted that would be able to say, like, this is how I use it in my life. This is why I want to support this direct farmer. And I think for us, it continues to build the case for elected officials, groups, entities, whether on the city level or the federal level, to say, this is farm viability too. Do not continue to split us on, political divides and say, this is an issue of just food security, or SNAP only speaks to communities that you are marginalized.
Right.
This is actual connector piece between the two.
Yeah. That's huge, because those are often two very different conversations: food access, food security, and then like farm viability, right? Those are like yeah. So.
And and same with like the farm bill. So long people kind of split in the middle between what is food and farm protection for farmers, as opposed to food security, like the SNAP. And I think what we see now more and more, we need true solidarity across the board. We are dealing with inequities that, again, are purposeful and built to keep us marginalized, ostracized, and fighting against each other. We should, in the grassroots, should not be apart. We should really be finding common threads through our work. So when it's time to show up, we can, whether it's with our dollar, going to a CSA or a farmer's market, whether it's through policy and advocacy, whether that's a sign-on letter, or pushing our elected officials to make sure that the upstate and the downstate have those stronger connections. Or it's even just for us to really understand from both sides, like, what is this true train? Why are we supporting farmers? Why do we want this food? And what do they need in order to get it to us?
Right. I mean, that's sort of like the power of local food right there,
Exactly.
right? Like growing and buying our own food, farmers,
Yes.
eaters, communities, like together, and not being sold shitty food by corporations, right?
Exactly. No, exactly.
Sort of like the crux of it.
It's the crux of it.
Yeah.
So to me, like, I love the term solidarity economy. I find it really powering, not empowered, because it truly is saying everybody in this chain is a change maker, from the individual to the producer. But, at the same time, it's the work that we're doing already. It's the work that farmers are doing already. It's the work that community leaders are doing already. Like a market manager, a CSA core group leader, a person who is joining a CSA who goes to that market, somebody who signed on to a letter. Like, we are the change makers, so I feel like this is that economy. Like, how do we build this multiplier effect? If we have this dollar that's so hard fought, how are we making sure that it lives within our community? So it's going to the farmer that we want, to the market that we want, to the CSA that we want, the business that we want, is the restaurant that we're eating, is the chef that we want there. And, never to forget, like, it's so easy to kind of talk about just the food and how we get it or how it ends up on our plate. Mm-hmm. But we really can't forget, like, who is actually growing that food in addition to farmers. We have to talk about farm workers. We have to talk about folks that are in the front and back of the house. We have to talk about volunteers that are like working mm-hmm. to get this food in our community, whether through business or otherwise. And that's, fair labor. That's fair, that really has to talk about farm workers. It's talking about fair labor across the board. It's talking about not so much questioning always why things are so expensive, but why is it that we can't afford to support somebody doing environmental practices so well? Or why can't we support a farmer to pay their farm workers well? We need that dollar to not just, when I say multiplier, it's not just to stretch it across among us, it's really to make sure we're building the wealth in our communities. And wealth of people, wealth of labor, as well as like wealth of capital and resources.
Right. I wanted to ask you about mm-hmm. the value chain map.
Yeah.
So how does that apply to this conversation? I saw it on the website, and I'm just curious exactly what the goal of that map is.
Yeah. So I will. The reason why I'm laughing is value chain map. I know it's not the most descriptive or sexiest of terms, and definitely it's a term.
I mean, I talk about farming. I know a lot about unsexy terms. Don't worry about that.
Oh, good. And I know, and I've heard from like my partners too, where they're like, "Can we call that something else?" Totally open to it. What it really is trying to speak to is, can the map is really serving as a public-facing a tool to be to increase awareness of local farms that are within 250 miles or as hyperlocal as the 5 boroughs. Can people themselves have a map and an opportunity to really just see how they can directly connect to farmers and the producers that we want? For us, it's also a place that holds that information on the internal side, is like the database. Are we holding information or sharing information, whether for individuals, groups, businesses, to help build those connections? So when folks say, I want to connect with a Black farmer, or I want to connect with a local farmer, folks are not only able to see it visually or call them, but we're also able on the back end to hold the other parts of that information, like their roots, their numbers, the products that they're connected to, what are some other farmers that they aggregate from. We want to be able to leverage that information to get it to more folks, to make sure they're getting down to the city as much as possible. And we're maximizing that truck route. We're maximizing those connections beyond just CSA. So for years, we had a CSA map. And then we'd have like a list of like farmers markets. And through the map, you might find out about farmers. We started to realize more and more that some of this information really, if folks are going to really understand what local food is, they need to be able to access that information. And the map was a real clear visual way to do that. And also see what the direct connection is. It's like, oh, I can actually go to their website and see what they're doing, how they grow, ask questions. So if I join their CSA, I know this relationship. It's like the base of the building of relationship and that information. And then for us, the map on the back side, there's additional information that we're able to share. So it's like, are there mission-aligned farmers that are really in support of the ethos of like just food? Are individuals, businesses, and other entities able to access that information as feasibly as possible, but are we able to leverage it on the back end to build, again, like that connective tissue to get it further to folks? Because it's not going to always be just joining a CSA.
Right, yeah. Well, the name might not be sexy, but it sounds like a great project.
Trying. And, in typical grassroots fashion, if we've been working with volunteers to build out that tool. And I really kind of pushed us as an organization to make sure it was software and a tool that was as easy to update as possible, flexible, but it's like volunteer driven right now.
Yeah.
With additional funding, we'll be able to do more of the updates and get more folks in, and same, like wanting to make sure that we're increasing awareness to farmers and producers that come down to the city already who want to come down, that folks know like it exists, it's right there.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Trying.
So we got to wrap up soon, but just before we go, what's next for Just Food? Like, what do you see happening in the next year or 5 years?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would love to. Right now, it's working at a scale as we do. It's really helpful right now to kind of think about the year ahead.
Yeah.
5 years ahead, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But
I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, so don't worry.
Exactly. So in terms of like the future, what we're really trying to do is diversify our funding. So we're getting resources again back to the communities and our partners that are doing this hard work. Are we continuing to build the infrastructure that's needed to amplify their work further? So what that looks like is like stronger CSAs, more vibrant community-run farmers markets, increasing the self-determination and autonomy of those community leaders and projects, continuing to, lean into farmer needs in order to make sure that they're strong, that we're helping them increase viability, building new market opportunities on the downstate, starting to look at other aggregation opportunities on the upstate that might actually support their work and, and building that chain. Are we building a more realistic pipeline? Are we getting more, again, disproportionate farmers that have been impacted? Are we getting more Black and Indigenous and Latinx farmers in? Are we still supporting small-scale farmers? So that looks like, programs like our some of our mushroom enterprise programs. So are we building enterprise with our partners? Are we making sure that markets are here for farmers to come down to and their food is going to have a home? Are we building new, consistent opportunities that folks that want to scale up? Scale up in the sense of like start a market, or do they need more food? Another thing that is really exciting is doing supportive work around community-based food hub or other value chain work that's happening in the city. So making sure that hyperlocal growers and producers are actually able to get into chains that their food is going to get to even more folks, and that we're building infrastructure like commercial kitchens so they're better able to connect to chefs and restaurants or institutional purchasing to be able to say make value-added products from that Whole Foods. Are we supporting small businesses in that? So that looks like projects like supporting the Brooklyn Food Hub, supporting our mushroom enterprise project. It looks like, supporting commercial kitchen incubation in order to make sure like we're not our nutrition education program, like community chefs. So are we increasing local sourcing by building consistent market and demand in the city so those farmers have a reason, and then continuing to find pipelines to Black and Indigenous and Latinx farmers that are new, beginning, or long-standing that may have lost connection to the city. How do we realistically and genuinely with intention build models for them and those relationships? We're also doing work around youth leadership pipeline, so building like new emerging leaders in the social justice space and policy. More and more, if we're going to talk about capital and resources, we really have to continue to build policy or inform policy that really speaks to supporting this scale of work. So for us, that's continuing to find new grants and opportunities as an organization to continue our capacity building work. But are there other grants and programs that we should be connecting our existing partners to and working with them on grants in order to really kind of build that pipeline and infrastructure?
Right. And are you still doing the annual conference?
Yes. Yeah. It's no longer going to be annual.
Okay.
What we're doing is biennial. Is that the right word? Yeah.
Every 2 years. I always get confused which word means every 2 years and which is twice a year.
I should know
so
this.
Every 2 years.
Yes. So we're definitely going to build the conference, and we have some anchor funding to build our youth leadership, to build our youth justice track from generous donation from the Levitt Foundation. 2020 conference plan for the spring. We really want to build off the great work and pivot that we did in 2018. I also want to make sure that we're able to bring back the gala this fall. I would really love to use that as not just a fundraiser for the organization, but as a genuine opportunity for folks to be connected to the culinary world, the food world, and community leaders. And people really felt like they were seen and heard in that gala. They got connected to the intersection of our like food justice, access, and culinary space. Writers, chefs, restaurants. I really want to continue to amplify folks of color, folks that are mission aligned with Just Food, and making sure our partners in the food growing space and our eating space are also connected to the chefs and the food and nutrition education.
Do you have a date for the gala yet?
No. Right now we're looking at the fall, but I'm also starting to look for sponsors.
Got it.
So help support Just Food.
Amazing. Kiana, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and share it.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.